The MLB playoffs are raging on, but we still want to have some conversations about, I mean, do the Cardinals really need to go full rebuild here? Can't they still be competitive in 2025 and make some of the necessary changes? Does ownership really need to sell us on having to take a step back in order to take a step forward? Let's talk about all this and a bonus debate about the greatest player of all time, because we have a Shohei Ohtani stan over here on this episode of Dealing the Cards. Hey, before we get into Lane Thomas talk, before we get into front office and ownership talk, real quick, if you're watching now, appreciate the support. Like and subscribe helps the channel out a ton. We go live twice a week, Q&A episodes, prospect episodes, guest appearances, all that fun stuff here. It's been a fun season, and we're really looking forward to the offseason despite some frustrating messaging at times from the front office. And I think we'll all three share differing viewpoints on how we feel about their decisions that they're going. It seems like they're moving into this offseason. But beforehand, we were like yelling pre-show about some of this, text yelling at each other that Shohei Ohtani is not the greatest player in baseball history.
I misspoke.
Yet.
To be fair.
Misspoke.
Okay.
What a walk back.
Yeah, like I have a lot of texts that say you were defending that thing.
No, not at all.
Real quick to catch people
I'm not gonna
up,
allow that.
I think at least I'm of the opinion Barry Bonds is the best player of all time. I get he used the steroids, but there's a lot of reasons to believe he was that good even without them, and they just made him be better. I don't know where Sandy's at on the actual greatest player of all time. I think Shohei Ohtani is the most talented player I've ever seen, and he could become the greatest player of all time, but he is definitely not the greatest player of all time yet.
I don't think Ohtani can get to greatest player of all time status.
Okay, give the take. I want to hear it.
So let me tell you. So, like, no matter what WAR you use, Ohtani is never gonna he's never gonna get to 100 WAR in all likelihood. He could maybe, but he would have to he's already gonna be 31 next year. He's already fairly old for a guy who's only really played 3 healthy seasons of hitting and pitching. Ohtani has 4 great seasons, but part of being the GOAT in baseball is doing it over a long time. There are plenty of great players throughout history that no one remembers because they only did it for a few years. Ohtani's not going to be that. Ohtani will always be remembered. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's one of the best players we've ever watched. I'm not disputing that. I'm not disputing his greatness. I'm just saying I don't see a way for him to get to GOAT. One of the beautiful things about baseball is that there really is no true GOAT. There's always going to be an argument about it. It's just really hard to do that with baseball. There's so much history. There are so many different ways to be great at the game. There are different players that have excelled in different ways. Like if you want to talk about pitching GOAT, that's an entirely different conversation, right? Like I don't think Ohtani's ever going to be undisputed GOAT. Also, counting stats matter in baseball. I'm not you need 400 or 500 home runs and 300 wins to get into the Hall of Fame. I don't think that's true. But they matter. Ohtani is never going to join the 500 home run club. He could, I guess. I kind of doubt it. He's never going to have the counting stats of a guy like Albert Pujols, for example. And then also, we saw Ohtani at his very, very best this year. He was still really good, but I'm sorry, he wasn't as good as Aaron Judge this year, who had a better year than Ohtani's best offensive year ever. And I know he didn't pitch, but when Ohtani was pitching, he wasn't hitting this well either.
Ohtani's WRC plus this year is 202nd best all-time season, which is awesome. Barry Bonds has 3 top 10.
It's insane.
How many of those were he using steroids, though? All 3 of them?
All 3 of them. But he does have at least 2 seasons better than Ohtani's
Here's
best
a good Barry Bonds.
Steroids, at least.
Barry Bonds stats are crazy, and there's a number. You could have a crazy Barry Bonds stat for every day of the year. A good one is no one went over 1250 OPS after Babe Ruth. Ted Williams did it once. No one else did it again until Barry Bonds did it 4 times in 4 years.
Because he was on steroids.
Okay, so the earliest they think he could have started using steroids is 1998. So starting in 1990, he had a 165, 155, 198, 193, 173, 163, 179, 165, and then a 170 WRC plus seasons. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons with above 8 WAR, 1 above 10. Okay, he was amazing pre-steroids.
Yeah, but I don't think, if you look at his pre-steroid stats, he's probably not better than guys like Mike Trout and Albert Pujols. And he started, you look at his 4 straight MVP seasons, he was 36, 37, 38, and 39. There's no way that if he aged like a normal person, would have won even 1 MVP in that stretch without.
You can't say he never would have won 1.
Also, he was definitely comparable, if not better, than Mike Trout. Probably barely edges him out, barely. But I don't even know if that's
I think we're
true.
Underselling Trout's greatness.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Trout was on pace to be a top 10
Ohtani.
player of all time.
Yeah, no, Andrew's baking in a lot of like Ohtani recovering from injuries. And had we said that for Trout,
yeah,
he's a Mount Rushmore player in baseball history.
That's a great point. Cause like 5 years ago, I was like, no, Trout's for sure a top 10 player of all time, no doubt. And I was already baking in he was going to keep doing these things. And then he did fall off. The injuries did happen. Like,
I mean, let's be real though. Trout's been injured, and he's still like when he was healthy this year, put up a 140 OPS
like
plus,
25
and
games
easily be healthy.
Year.
Could easily be healthy in the future. Also, like Ohtani is never going to make up the 45 WAR gap between him and Trout. I'm sorry, like Trout. I think it'll be really hard to pass him. I think it's going to be.
Trout
really
put up 1.1 WAR this year. Ohtani put up 9.2 as strictly a DH. If he pitches next year,
and he narrowed the gap to 40 something, like it's still
if he keeps putting up like 9, 10, 11 WAR seasons for the next like 4 seasons, and Trout keeps getting hurt.
How many times has he put up?
He can shrink the gap.
He's done it 4 years in a row where he said 9+ WAR seasons.
According to
Baseball Reference.
I didn't. So wait, does Baseball Reference on the WAR separate the pitching?
Yeah,
and
it separates the pitching and the hitting.
Okay, because I was going to say earlier I did not see a 10 WAR. Okay, well I use F4 because I think F4.
He has like 3 10 WAR seasons. Anyway, this is a Cardinals pod. Let's reel it back.
Wait a second. Andrew's telling us to reel it back in on Shohei Ohtani talk.
Dodgers fan.
What? Anyways, okay. Well,
the Mets have the highest payroll in all of baseball.
We're not doing this. Sorry, I know that we got some feedback in the survey, which we really appreciate the survey results. That we're sometimes a little all over the place. Today's going to be one of those because we have a lot of random topics we want to hit, but we will be more structured going forward for sure. The Lane Thomas thing, though. Okay, I have zero. I do not want to talk about this, but like, let's do it, I guess. I saw someone say Lane Thomas is the Adolis Garcia of Randy Rosarenas, and I was like, perfect. I don't care about Lane Thomas. I don't care. Anyone?
I mean, I don't like when the trade happened, it was obvious that the Cardinals were giving up more than they were getting back. Like they were getting back half a season of old John Lester, who was on the verge of retirement.
Yeah.
But at the time, it made a lot of sense for the Cardinals. If they don't make that trade, they don't make the playoffs. I'm sorry. Yeah. John Lester pitched really well down the stretch for the Cardinals. Well, he pitched well enough for really hot offense to win a lot of games.
Yeah.
John Lester,
low bar.
He was a slightly above league average pitcher, which is all the Cardinals needed because that pitching staff was really struggling at the time. And if you remember in 2020, the Cardinals have been throwing out people that had no business being on a big league mound. And it was more the same that year in 2021. So they really had to make that kind of deal. And look, if you're the Nationals, you're not going to give up a guy who has some value at the deadline for nothing. But at the same time, what is Lane Thomas to the Cardinals? He was a 5th outfielder.
Yeah.
Like he had a really nice stretch the previous year, but he broke his wrist. I remember he had some injury concerns. It is what it is. The Cardinals made a trade. You had to do it. You had to bring back more like something. I don't know. I just don't think it's that big a deal. I know that at the time, even some people were like, this could bite the Cardinals in the butt later, but there are 5 more talented outfielders in the system that you'd rather bank on. And I think had the Cardinals traded someone else for a pitcher at that deadline, it would have been much worse, right? Like you weren't going to trade young Jordan Walker right after drafting him, you know? Yeah. So I don't think it's that big a deal.
Dylan Carlson instead. To
Washington. Soto.
It does suck though, because I think it's still a bad trade. So it's like I'm not gonna sit here and act like people shouldn't rip the Cardinals for the trade because it just was. But like, I mean, you again, like you gave him up for freaking John Lester. Like I know it helped to make the playoffs, so it's like sure that's helpful. But like when you're in someone like Mo's shoes, you have to have the long game focus. And I mean, Lester was nothing. Like that's a terrible player. So like, and the production you got out of him, and you didn't really go anywhere in October. I think it's still a terrible trade. With that being said, I do not care they don't have Lane Thomas today. I just think I think it's fair to rip him for the trade, but
he's an 85 WAR player or OPS player.
85 WAR.
That's
I would be really mad.
I'd be really upset. That'd be like giving up Mike Trout. He's an 85 OPS player. Like I just who would Lane Thomas have ever started for the Cardinals? Let's have that conversation. When would Lane Thomas have contributed to the Cardinals roster?
This year in center field over Michael Ciani.
Okay, are you sure Lane Thomas would even still be on the roster had they kept him at that deadline? Like I'm thinking about it sequentially, and there's no way he would have impacted the 2022 club. There's just no way. That club had a lot of depth. They had a lot of interesting guys, and he would not have been in the plans for 2023, where the Cardinals thought they had their outfield at least figured out.
Here's an interesting thought for Cleveland. Is it so? He said, we need to stop revisiting past moves by the front office. If you thought it was good then, it's good forever. Is it not? I mean, like, I think you still have. It's still fair to have a little bit of revisionist history of looking back on something because, like, let's say you acquire a rental arm at a deadline, and it's like, oh, they were a good pitcher for you down, like Jose Quintana, but then Johan Oviedo goes on to be a 3-time Cy Young winner. We should all look back at that trade being as and it being a terrible
Cole
trade.
Reagans is that trade. Cole Reagans is that guy.
Yeah, I think it's fair, like, to Cleveland's point, people shouldn't act like they knew at the time it was a terrible trade. That stuff I hate. But, like, to be like, hey, looking back, that was an awful trade. I don't think that's unfair to do. And it's also, again, as the front office, your job isn't just to think about how do you win this year. It's also how do you maintain a long view. Again, that's where I don't think Lane Thomas is a huge deal because to Sandy's point, I think there's like stretches over the last few years where Lane Thomas could have been a starter for you. But overall, like last year, I guess. This year, I guess he was good last year.
Well,
but
we're baking in that he would have gotten those opportunities, though. It's the same thing with Adolis Garcia. Adolis Garcia may have had talent when the Cardinals shipped him off for nothing, but it took him 2 seasons of like really fighting through just not being good at baseball to realize that at the big league level. And those Cardinals teams did not have the at-bats to allocate to him.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but the 2022 Cardinals were really good, and they didn't have time to give Lane Thomas mid at bats. Whereas the 2022 Nationals, who sucked, they were like throwing guys out there. Joey Meneses was out there. Like everyone, you get an at bat, you get an at bat. So.
Yeah, I think this is actually a perfect segue into the front office talk. So real quick, I want to thank one of our sponsors of the podcast before we deep dive a little bit into like, should the Cardinals really be taking a step back in terms of payroll and all that kind of stuff? But it's 314 Sports Cards and Collectibles. They're located at 9640 Olive Boulevard in Olivet, open 10 to 5 Monday through Friday and 9 to 4 on Saturdays. They buy, sell, and trade all sports and trading cards, Pokemon cards. They even have all the rookie. Well, they used to have rookie cards of Irving Lopez, but Andrew owns all of them now. So if Irving Lopez goes on to be really good, Andrew's going to be in good shape. They sell
the Cardinals traded that guy for nothing.
They actually let him walk to the Mexican League where he had a 500 OPS.
Oh, wild. Hey, well, they do sell the newest selections of packed boxes and single cards of local players around the league, and local players and stars around the league. They also have, like old past rookie cards and valuable cards from the past. So go check out 314 Sports Cards. Let them know we sent you. We already know many of you go and check them out. They've told us that before. Anyways, I'm trying to get back into sports trading cards now. I think Andrew's like fully addicted into it now, which is, it's a fun thing. You want to say fully yet?
I don't think so.
Okay, he's getting there. Something really cool too. So go to Instagram. They post some of their live deals over there. But then they also, if you go in their link tree, there's some apps they use where they live stream like bidding cards, and so you can go on there, hop into live stream, and they'll have a card, and you place bids, and you can win it live on there. And so you don't have to go in to get the card. So. Anyways, go check out 314 Sports Cards and Collectibles. They've been a great partner to us, and we love them. Thanks to 314. Okay, so speaking of the opportunities, I think it's fair to debate whether or not the Cardinals should, like, do we buy into the idea that they have to get worse next year in order to get better long-term? Can't they maintain a winning club next year and not trade away veterans and also do player investment? I want you guys to jump in with that, but the segue I'm going to say is the reason, more so than the money, which I know people care about, that I actually like the idea of going youth movement next year is it does give opportunities to guys that the Cardinals need to figure out what they have in them. And to like your point, Sandy, if Thomas at JC is their next Lane Thomas, where it's like, well, if they keep Arenado and Donovan and Gorman, they will keep Donovan and Gorman, but they keep Goldie, bring him back. Like, if they had this full infield, Thomas at JC is not really going to play much, and you may never know what you have in him, but he's a guy next year who can get increased opportunities. I think Ivan Herrera is a way better example of this too, where it's like, hey, if they do move Wilson Contreras, that's a lot of opportunity for Ivan Herrera that he should have already, because Pedro Pie should not be playing over him. But I like the idea of giving these young guys some opportunity in 2025. So in 2026, 2027, you kind of have a gauge for who you like and who you need to improve on. So, like, say the outfield's still a mess, but they feel good about the infield. Now they know they need to go trade for an outfielder or sign an outfielder because they don't have the answers there. Or if they're like, hey, McGreevy and Quinn Matthews work, but like Takoa Roby and Tink Hence aren't going to be those guys. Like, now they know, okay, they know some of their arms and they need others. I like the idea that they finally get a reset year, that when you're competing every single year, you just don't have opportunities to do that. But Andrew, Sandy, I don't know who, maybe Andrew, you can go first on this one. Like, Are you upset about the idea that they're going to be cutting back on payroll, and do you feel like fans are being given a disservice by taking a step back at the major league level next year?
Yeah, I think you can do both at the same time, right? Like, you can go out and you can improve your farm system, and if you don't bring back Goldie, you save like 20 million. And even that salary alone, like if you spend 20 million on your farm system, I don't think you can really do that, right? Like, you bring in those instructors, you start a pitching lab, maybe it costs like there's no way it costs that much, right? It probably costs more like what you're going to do, what you're going to get back when you cut bait with Lance Lynn, right? And I understand if you don't get to like the 200 million threshold or whatever, and if you lower payroll by like 15 million, but to go out in there and to trade Contreras and Sonny Gray and Arenado and not bring back Goldie and cut Gibson and Lynn and not bring anything back to really supplement that, I think is a big miss, right? Because you could take the Gibson and Lynn money and then you could reinvest that into getting a higher end starting pitcher, and you pair that higher end starting pitcher with a McGreevy or a Quinn Matthews or somebody who will also get chances to play, and you have better production than you got out of Lynn and Gibson, right? Because that higher end starter will be a lot better, and McGreevy will probably give you similar numbers to like Gibson, right? So you've already improved your rotation by basically spending the same amount of money. And this team won 83 games this year. That was like one less than the Diamondbacks snuck into the playoffs with last year, right? Like, this year's wild card was pretty heavily contested, but I don't know if that's going to be the case next year. And I don't know if the Central is going to be as closed off as it was with the Brewers, because the Brewers kind of showed us who they were in the postseason, which is not very good. And like, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of ways to contend without just cutting all this payroll, because there's no way they spend all of the payroll that they end up cutting on the minor league system. It's just not really possible to do that. Yeah, I think it's disappointing that they're not going to go out and contend. And I understand the TV deal is up in the air, but I mean, you've made so much money over the years. Like, it's not really that much more they're going to be reinvesting into the team. And just go out there and spend smart, right? Like, maybe DeWitt is going to pull back a little bit because maybe he doesn't trust Mo to spend smart. Maybe he thinks Mo will sign like someone who's not very good to a long-term contract, and it'll be really bad for the future, right? Maybe that's what this is all about. Maybe DeWitt's grown tired of Mo and really doesn't want to give him that much to work with in his last year, which I think is totally understandable. Honestly, like, I wouldn't, if I'm Chaim Bloom, I wouldn't really want to take over, like, let's say a team that signs like another Miles Michaelis to a 5-year contract, right? Like, there's probably going to be somebody out there that ends up just being a horrible contract this offseason, and maybe they don't want Mo. Maybe they don't want Mo to mess with that. But I guess, like, the point is, we should just try to contend next year. You have the resources to do it. You cut bait with Lynn and Gibson. Maybe trade Miles Michaelis, cut some of that payroll, like, and then you can reinvest it and make the team better for next year. But they're not going to do that, and that's frustrating. But Mike Schultz out of the playoffs, which Ollie's going to beat those allegations now.
I mean, I think it's I think you hit on one thing that I really agree with, which is the idea that, like, the team is going to be investing less total money. So the way they seem to be framing it is, we're cutting here so we can add here. But I think that is disingenuous, because I think they'll be investing less total money. And I think that's a little frustrating, because if you're going to own this team, like, do it right. You know, obviously I don't own a baseball team. I can't tell you what it's like to have to do it. It's probably tough, probably a lot of really hard business decisions. But if you're going to own this team in St. Louis that we all really, really love, that frankly we assign way too much value to, as just humongous fans who really care about this, you know, go all in. Don't cut total spending. Like, that really sucks. It really sucks as a fan if they're cutting payroll and they're not going to invest all that. And there's just no way, right? Like, if they cut $40 million from payroll, there's no way they invest all of that into the system. They're going to save a lot of money. And that's a bummer. And I think that is kind of how you start to see relationships deteriorate between an owner and a city, where it's like, yeah, you guys didn't show up to the game, so now I'm not going to invest in the team, and now you're not going to show up to the game, so I'm going to invest even less in the team. I'm not going to compare it to the Fisher situation with Oakland or anything like that, but I think that's how you see those relationships start to deteriorate. And it'd be a really bad thing for fans to be really angry with ownership, because it's just a no-win scenario for anybody involved. So I think that's one angle here. The other angle is, I think I am a lot higher on some of the young talent that's still here than a lot of other people. And I don't see why the Cardinals, like Andrew said, I don't even think you have to invest that much in the team. You have to give them a little bit. You probably have to go out and get a reliever or two. You probably have to go out and get somebody to start for you, at least to get some depth. But I mean, I'm not super low on the guys that are left. I don't see any reason they can't win 2 more games next year than they won this year. There are a lot of things that are going to be tough. You lose Sonny Gray, you lose Ryan Helsley, you lose Wilson Contreras. Those are bad things. But also you get more Andre Palante. That's a good thing if he continues to be what he was this year. You probably, I mean, I'm sure banking on a Jordan Walker, Nolan Gorman resurgence. I hope those are aberrations. You get more Brendan Donovan, hopefully more Lars Nootbaar. Hopefully he's healthy this year. Newt had another really good year when you add it all up and think about when he was actually out there. More Michael McGreevy, who's complaining about that? More John King, come on. So I see a lot of reasons to be like positive about what this team can do with a total youth movement. I'd love to see what Thomas Sajazi has. But obviously if you do that, there is a chance that things bottom out and it's hard to watch at some point next year. So I guess that's possible too. But yeah, I just don't think there's any reason the Cardinals can't win some games and surprise some people with a scrappy young team. But I get what Andrew says, where it's like, come on, if you're going to own a team, do it right and act like you care.
Yeah. I do think I appreciated Mo in the press conference jumping in and saying, hey, I expect payroll to go down, because I think part of what the DeWitts, and I think they're just I don't know them, so I can't really tell you much about them, but I think there's a pretty strong case that they at least are just terrible with public relations. And
I don't think they know what they're doing with it.
And I just think I think when they're asked like, hey, is payroll going to go down and stuff going to go down? Like they're anticipating investments into player development, but there are real questions about revenue right now that I think they're still sorting out the answers to. Like we don't really talk about it a lot, but the Diamonds, I mean, we talk about, but we don't talk about the dollar side of it a lot. The Diamond Sports Group stuff. Yes, long term, all of us want to see direct to consumer product streaming stuff, and long term, it's probably a more lucrative solution for the Cardinals. But the immediate future, they're probably losing out on a $75 million paycheck from Diamond Sports Group, which is a significant chunk of revenue. And even if they pivot to the direct to consumer this year, there's no way they're going to make up that $75 million in 1 year. Even with advertisements, even with the subscribers. Now, I am not saying if you're of the opinion, please don't hear this as me being like, you're an idiot for not agreeing with me on this. If you think they should still spend through it and take the L there, okay, that's fine. I think I'm just of the opinion, I'm like, okay, if you're going to take significant revenue loss in tickets, concessions, TV, all this in 1 year, I'm not shocked that they're going to be spending at least less on things. Again, I agree. When you own a sports team, no one forces you to buy the St. Louis Cardinals. They've made a huge, what they buy them for, like $150 million, and now they're worth multiple billions of dollars. Like they have made their money back plenty on this organization at this point, and they have other business ventures. They can invest more in this team if they want to. I'm just not like completely, I'm just not completely shocked. And I don't think they're necessarily being disingenuous by not talking about that yet, because partially I think they don't even fully know the answer yet. And so I don't think there's a point in like dropping a nuclear bomb and saying, hey, we're going to be cutting everyone, trading everyone. And then they realize they don't need to do that. But they also should probably be a little bit more transparent about, hey, we are like, they've talked about, they haven't figured out revenue yet, but they really haven't. At least in that press conference, they didn't do a great job of forecasting, hey, we are worried about finances right now. We think it's going to, like, again, I don't think fans would necessarily love to hear it and they can critique him for it, but at least they're being honest at that point. I don't think they're necessarily lying. Like some people say they're lying or like misleading us. I don't think it's that. I just think that they're not going there yet. And we all know that's where they're eventually going to go. So, but like also, like if they do figure out enough of that revenue stuff, or they feel in a little bit better of a place, they don't have to trade Sonny Gray. They don't have to trade Wilson Contreras. I think these are also things where they're they also can't force Sonny Gray to go. Like if Sonny Gray wants to stay, they can't stop him, and so they might have to keep that money on the books for Wilson Contreras. And so, like maybe they do trade them because they get a good value back. And I think that'll probably be a future episode we do is like, what is the line you need to get to before you're willing to trade Sonny Gray? Because I think some people would be like, just move the money and whatever you get, it's great. I'm of the opinion it's like, you don't move Sonny Gray unless you get a real package, because I think he's worth it. And if you don't get it, why not keep him? But then like the Miles Michaelis conversation, like, do you need to get rid of him? Because you need someone to throw innings for you next year. And like, you're going to pay him to go play elsewhere. Like you don't have 5 young starters who are ready. So why not just not pay Lennon Gibson? And you already have that money on the books. So I think that's why it's so hard to know right now. And all of our conversations are so all over the place because there's so many directions they could go right now. And I think they are genuinely weighing those things still.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There's just a lot going on. It's also really hard because sometimes it feels like they want fans to like, I just don't know how they want it received when they're like, oh, we're losing money. It's like, okay, billionaire, I mean, it's tough as a fan who like balks at concession prices, like I show up to the game and it's like the Cardinals are dealing in hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in terms of net worth. And it's like, man, this $13 hot dog is looking steep. You know what I mean? So it is hard as a fan who is very removed from that world to feel bad for, this revenue loss. It's tough. It's tough to like get rid of that.
Oh, and please don't hear me saying anyone needs to feel bad for them. I just think when you run a business, like again, obviously comparing, I'm not trying to say this, but you can't compare a small business owner to a billionaire. But at the same time, like if you own a business or run a company, you understand if your revenue gets cut significantly in multiple areas, you have to stop. You have to cut some spending, and then also where they're choosing to spend money on baseball operations wise is something that should make them more cost efficient, make them better long term, and get them back into spending. And I think this is a real thing we should talk about in the future too, is like, do we trust that they're going to reinvest the money in the Major League Baseball team eventually when they do cut prices, or are they going to be like, we really like spending only $120 million a year on payroll, and that's where we're going to go? Like,
that would be awful.
That's a future that we don't know what they're going to do. Now, I do think the ownership has talked many times before. We love stars, and I think they do think this is a star-driven market, and so I do not think there's a world where they just like turn into the Rays and trade away guys because they cost too much now. But could they get comfortable not hitting 175, 180 million in payroll? I could see that, and how people respond will probably be very different across the board. So, Andrew, anything else you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's fair, but like they also did tell us, hey, payroll will go up because we signed Albert Pujols to a $2 million contract, and we made way more than that back. So
yeah.
They didn't really do that. And I think that's what's mainly frustrating. Like if they had increased payroll to like near the luxury tax and they're like, oh, we're going to cut back a little bit this year, that would be fairly understandable, right? Like you don't bring back Lennon Gibson, but you've already signed Trey Turner to that contract, or you've already signed, who was the starter that we wanted to go after last year? I don't remember.
Nola or like Tyler Glasnow.
Right. He would be hurt.
Yamamoto's
pretty good.
No chance that happened.
But if you already have those established guys and you're like, hey, we're not bringing back Lennon Gibson, we're cutting payroll. It's like, okay, well, whatever. But you don't really have those stars on your team right now, right? So you can go out and get them. You can pay for them. I'm not maybe asking you to get Juan Soto. But there's other guys you can go out and sign that can supplement your team with star power.
I mean, I think an Anthony Santander would make a lot of sense.
I actually don't like Anthony Santander.
I just think timeline-wise, I don't know why.
I agree with that. Unless you're trying to contend this year, which like it seems like you're more interested in this rebuild than we are.
Well, I'm not interested in a 2027, 2026 rebuild, but like a reset,
a retool.
That's fine, because then you invest. I'd rather invest next offseason, the offseason after that, when you know what your young core is. I was talking to someone about this. Cannot remember who or where, but I was saying like, I think the Cardinals kind of built in a weird way before, where they got so far away from player development, they fell off in it, that they had to go trade for their stars. They didn't have any, so they went and traded for a huge contract on Arado, traded for Paul Goldschmidt, and they were kind of hoping that their young core would become the like ancillary pieces around them, and they got like a random Tyler O'Neill year. They did get the $2 million Pujols year, but that young core just never really developed to be the pieces they needed around Goldschmidt or Arenado until it's too late. And well, I mean, this year they weren't good either. And I think what they're trying to flip the model is this time is, hey, let's build up our core and then let's go out and add the last pieces to go out on, like, to put the cherries on top, or like, hey, we're clearly missing one pillar and so we're going to go out and get that pillar, instead of being like, hey, we just had to go out and get the two biggest bats we need, but we're still lacking the pitching. We still, until last year, didn't have a deep lineup. Like, they're still missing a lot of the pieces. So I like that they're potentially building up the foundation first and then going to add on top of it. Or realize that there's a part of their foundation that they can't do internally and they need to go out and get that guy. But we'll see on that. I do think so. Maybe to round out our conversation today, because I think it encapsulates a lot of smaller conversations that are happening. I think Cody brought it up. Y'all see that Descalso is a target for a White Sox managerial position, which would be really interesting because it'd make it forced every single year that Ollie has been manager, and the year he came into manager, they've lost their bench coach, because when Schilt left, Ollie became manager, so he had to hire Skip. Then Skip left and he hired Matt Holliday, and then Matt Holliday stepped away and they hired Joe McEwing, and then Joe McEwing got reassigned. They hired Descalso, and then they would lose Descalso. And we've got all that talk about Yadier selling his basketball team. We know Albert Pujols wants to coach, and he's okay not being a manager yet. We know Matt Holliday at some point. Here's how I want to tie it all together. Andrew, do you want the Cardinals to go target former players to add to this coaching staff? Or are you like go the opposite direction or somewhere in between? Like, how do you feel about the idea of, like, let's say that bench coach opens up. Are you like team Yachty, team Pujols, or are you team go get random guy with Chaim Bloom connection?
I'm team Albert Pujols for hitting coach. I think that makes a lot of sense, because he did like I keep hammering this, but like Goldie and Arenado had their best seasons of their careers when Albert Pujols was on the Cardinals.
And Jeff Albert.
Okay, well, yeah, but he was also there for other seasons. That
Tyler O'Neill got worse, so
well, Tyler O'Neill just got hurt.
Are you saying Albert Pujols is the reason that Tyler O'Neill fell off?
Yep.
I don't know. Probably not. Maybe Albert Pujols accidentally tripped him in the dugout, and then he like slid and like scraped his hand and was out for the rest of the year. I don't know. Maybe, but
knuckle contusion.
Yeah, something like that.
Injury.
But like you saw guys like Juan Yepes take huge steps forward in 2022 and then take huge steps back in 2023. And then when Pujols was on the Angels, he had a great veteran leadership role in the development of Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. So, I mean, he seems like a guy that everyone just respects hitting wise. And I don't know if he'll like, I think he would make a great hitting coach. I don't know if that's all he wants to do. Like, he wants to have more of a bench coach type role, but I think that would be a great position for him. Yachty, I don't know. I guess he sold his basketball team, so he's not doing anything else with his time. So he's not going to leave midway through the season.
Which also I think you posted this. He was liking all these comments from people saying, are you coming back to the Cardinals, right?
Oh, yeah. So who knows? I mean, he's already on the team's payroll, technically.
It's true.
Right? He's a special advisor. And Chaim Bloom was a special advisor, so maybe he's going to succeed Chaim Bloom.
The Chaim Bloom succession plan is already in place.
Yeah, like in 5 years after that, it's Yachty who will take over. I don't know. But other than that, I'm not really sure. I want like all these like former players coming back. It's kind of weird to me to bring back guys who are kind of like part of the problem. Like, I don't know if I want. Well, maybe not part of the problem, but like I don't know if you want to bring back guys who are part of the system that you guys have said has become antiquated. And
I was just saying, it's one thing if you're winning. It's another
like,
thing.
I get Albert Pujols and Yadier Molina because they're future Hall of Famers, but if you're going to bring back like I don't know, throw a random
Pete Cosma,
Alan Craig.
For Alan Craig.
Well, Alan Craig's the legit guy people are throwing out there.
I
Ryan
know.
Ludwig to be
I
the
love
hitting
Alan
coach.
Craig, favorite player of all time.
But like maybe it's like Matt Carpenter, for example. Like
Please
you brought him in to be a leader this year, and it didn't really work. So I don't know if you should really bring him onto the coaching staff. You know, like go let him do his MLB Network thing, and I don't know, like give it some time. Like let Chaim Bloom overhaul the system before you really do that.
So maybe that's the better question is like, because I think maybe there's 4 options. There's the Albert Pujols Yadier former player option. There's the John J. Alan Craig, Matt Carpenter former player option. There's go completely outside the organization or something in between. Or I guess it's 3. But like Sandy, how are you about the idea of former Cardinals? Like when a hitting coach, bench coach, are you like former Cardinal insert here, or are you kind of like tuned off to that? Like what's your opinion?
So it'd be one thing if, I mean, when we were in like 2019 and they were looking to replace coaching staff positions, it's like, yeah, the Cardinal way clearly works still. I mean, even our worst years, they were still 500 and then they just won the division. You know, it was like, whatever the system is, it's working, keep doing it, copy, paste, repeat type thing. So I was fine with it. But now clearly we're entering a new era of Cardinal baseball. It looks like the early 2000s thing has come to a close. Mozeliak is going to be gone. We're taking, you know, massive steps and just big change in direction. And so you don't need to bring in these voices. You don't have to, you know, I just don't see why. And when you bring in someone else, you're just committing to it for at least a year or 2 more, that you're just going to do more of the same. But it is like Pujols and Yadier are special cases because like Andrew said, they're future Hall of Famers. They know the game so well. They're special guys. And I think they're also kind of forcing the Cardinals' hand here. They're speeding up the timeline. Because if I had my way, I would bring in Pujols in 3 years, right? Let him have been away from the game for a few years. Let him get into the Hall of Fame, retire the number, bring him back. Like have all your ceremonial stuff, milk that as much as you want with the fan base. But like it would really, really suck for Pujols to be on this team and like be getting inducted into the Hall of Fame and have the Cardinals being like, all right, we also have to fire this guy because he's not good. You know,
that happens at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it would suck. It'd be a huge bummer. And I think that will like cause some really weird decisions, really weird, like really just tough positions for some of these front office guys to be in. But also like Pujols is telling people, hey, I want to manage next year. Oh gosh.
Jordan Walker for outfield coordinator.
Yeah. But Pujols is telling people like, hey, I want to manage and I don't want to just manage 5 years from now. I want to manage now. I want to manage next year. I want to be on a roster as soon as possible. You know, and so that's really like speeding the Cardinals up. And this kind of feels like if you don't take him and he's really good somewhere else, who knows how long he's going to be there.
Yeah. Which I don't know how much he's pushing. It sounds like he's not pushing to be the manager immediately. Like Yadier might be doing that. It sounds like Pujols is more content being like Pujols. I mean, Bernie shared with us that Pujols has asked to be a part of the Cardinals coaching staff. So not necessarily like even like I want to be your manager. Like I think Pujols is too humble for something like that. But I think at some point that starts to fast track it, right? The second you hire Albert Pujols, he is on the clock, going to be your manager at some point.
Yeah,
I have an idea.
Go for it.
Yadier already has experience with this. Make him the owner.
That's awesome. I could work with that.
Well, we'll never have an end of season press conference because he'll be somewhere else. We won't even know.
Well, the team will be playing basketball. So.
Oh gosh. I know this is super like lame, but I'm somewhere in between where it like depends on the guy and depends on the situation. Like, am I straight up don't bring back John Jay? No. It's just like what role is he gonna fill? Like first base, like if he's the third base coach or whatever, like sure. I mean, maybe. I don't know how good he is at that job. Daniel Scalzo is someone that like, I mean, we didn't really talk a lot about this year, but there's some good stories out there about how when he retired, he went back and got his master's. I think it's his master's degree, and and then his year in the front office with Arizona really helped him to become a guy that is now seen as like a liaison between the manager and the front office, and that he takes all the data and the analytics and really speaks it into like how should we use it in the game. Like that's an asset to have a guy like him, and no wonder the White Sox are looking at him as a manager that. Like hitting coach wise, Kareem hits the nail on the head. Like the John Storiopoulos, I can never say his name. I need to hear someone say it out loud. So I know it. Something like that. But he got promoted to be the Red Sox hitting coordinator going into this year. And Baseball America just did an incredible write up about how the development of their hitting player development over the past few years, but really how it really took a stride this year. And you saw Christian Campbell win Player of the Year. Roman Anthony's now the top prospect in baseball. Marcelo Myers top 15. Kyle Teal's top 25 as well. Like, go get a guy like that to be, and he's got connections to Bloom. Go get a guy like that to be your hitting coach. I would love, like, if Descalso leaves, I'm down to have Yadi or Pujols be a bench coach. But I'm less like desiring, or I guess not desiring, but I'm less like sold on Alan Craig or John Jay or guys like that, just because I'm like, they just don't have the same cachet as a Pujols or a Yadi. I genuinely think both those guys, Pujols actually put in his own class, and then Yadi below him. Of like, I think Pujols would be a great manager one day. It's not just because he's a great player. It's the way he communicates. It's the respect he has. It's his dedication to the game. It's the fact that he was basically a pupil of Tony La Russa and was like trying to prepare to be a manager in the middle of his prime. Like, that doesn't necessarily make him a good hitting coach, though. But to be a manager, I think that could be a great leader to take all the different voices in the room and to lead that kind of stuff well. Or a bench coach to learn under Ollie, which people will probably be like, he's teaching Ollie, but like, I think he'd be a good spot for him. But yeah, like, then when it comes to these other guys, I'm like, I would much rather see the Cardinals go and make these interesting hires than to just go bring back, I don't know, Alan Craig as your next bench coach. Matt Holliday's probably in the same tier as like Yadier Molina to me. The thing with Molina, which even more so scares me, Sandy, than the Pujols side of it, is like, I definitely see a world where like stuff ends really bad with Yadi. Like, I think Pujols can like figure out like, okay, like, I don't think he'd be happy about it, but like, I think he'd understand if he has to be fired and whatever. But like,
I mean,
Yadi getting fired seems like playing with fire.
You hire a manager and like, you guarantee that you're going to fire them eventually.
Yeah, or retire. It's one of those.
So rare though. And for a guy this young, like, he's not young in terms of being a player, but in terms of being a manager, like, Pujols would be really young. It's his first gig. And like, I don't know, even like legendary guys like Bruce Bochy, you know, I know Bruce Bochy stepped away, but the Rangers rehired him knowing like, well, you know, we may have to fire this guy someday. Like, that's part of the responsibility you take on. And I think it's really hard to do that with former players who already have like a really important connection to the club. It can be really hard for Cardinals fans someday to be like, man, Yadi was a great player. I can't stand him as a manager. Like, I would hate to have to say that.
Yeah, for sure. Any other thoughts on the former Cardinals coaches side of things? Well, there's a couple other thoughts in here that I think are worth jumping on real quick. They're little quick hitters. The Mr. Book asked, do you think Liberatore should be given a chance in the rotation? I've always thought he's capable with time to develop, work out the kinks. He could be like a Palante. How do we feel about Libby being given the opportunity to work toward being a starter again, or do you just keep him in the bullpen? Sandy, what are you thinking?
I think I'd leave him in the bullpen at this point. I guess it depends what the Cardinals do this offseason, right? Yeah. Like, if they cut ties with Lynn, Gibson, Gray, and Fetty, and it's like, well, open tryouts, sure, give him a shot in spring training. Like, let him try again, let him build up, let him start. But if we get to the season, we already have 5 guys. He's in the bullpen, and he was really good in the bullpen last year. So let him work as that lefty setup guy. With the Cardinals need it really bad this year too. They need him to be good if they're going to be good.
That's fair. Andrew, how about you?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. It depends on, like, if you're clear with the messaging and like, hey, we're going to let you try out as a starter, like Jordan Hicks.
Yes. Yeah. For sure.
Like, and if things go bad and you go back to the bullpen, or we're just going to ride you out as a starter. Like, I'd prefer that first option a lot more. Is Liberatore a Chaim Bloom drafted guy?
Yes, he was. So I did this like 2 months or a month and a half ago. I was like, I've never heard Chaim Bloom talk. So I was like, I'm going to go listen to some videos. And I clicked on him talking about their draft. And he was talking about how they drafted Liberatore in the first round. They love the pick. And then someone asked him, what about your second round pick, Shane McClanahan? And I was like, oh my gosh, Chaim. Like, what a steal. Anyways, yes, he's a Chaim Bloom pick.
Insane.
So what if? So what you're telling me is Liberatore is going to be better than Shane McClanahan under Chaim Bloom?
Who knows? Hey, side note, Chaim Bloom's part of the front office that fleeced the Cardinals for Randy Rosarina, so maybe he can fleece some other people. Just saying.
Oh my gosh,
Andrew, I'm with you though. If they're clear in the communication this offseason and they let Libby work toward being a starter and he gets the opportunity in camp to try and earn a rotation spot, I'm all in on it because I think he has the potential to be a very valuable starter, and that's more valuable than the lefty setup man. And I don't think it like if it doesn't work out and you move him back to the bullpen, I think it's fine. But then at that point, do not yank him around. He's either a reliever or a starter, and if he's a starter and he's not in your rotation, you send him to Memphis and you let him develop and you let him stay stretched out and you let him be ready to go. No more of this like, hey, we need a spot starter, so Libby, you're going to start, and then 3 days later you pitch out of the bullpen, then 4 days later you're in the rotation again, then you're in a bullpen rotation. Like, don't do that to him. He's not that kind of guy. Let him be a starter or be a reliever, but I don't think in the offseason it's a problem to let him stretch out and try it again, especially under new. Like, Dusty Blake's been really working some pitchers, and I think you've seen Libby being a little bit better the last few years, and then again, you're having a revamped player development system. Like, maybe some of that stuff has a good impact on Libby. And if it doesn't, like, I don't think it's a huge deal I don't think it's a problem to start him in spring training as a starter. And if it doesn't work out, to go to the bullpen. I think it is an issue to do the yanking back and forth. He does have one more club option. So like if they send him back to Memphis next year, they can do that one more time to start games. But like then the next year he couldn't be optioned again. So they have some flexibility there. The other thing I thought would be worth touching on real quick is, when do you think we're going to start hearing about Bloom's hires for the front office and some of the other coaching roles? I'd say it's hard to say, but I would guess probably after the postseason. But
yeah, not yet, but
yeah, it wasn't encouraging. If you didn't miss the episode on Sunday that Bernie and I got to do, we missed not having Andrew and Sandy there, but Bernie was talking about that Bloom has just been like ruthless with the amount of interviews he's been having with all across the organization and just like vetting guys left and right. And so it seems like he's really trying to find the best possible fits for this organization. So our friend Jeff Jones posted that tweet a while back of all the analytics department openings of Boston. So maybe there's some guys coming over from there.
Have we talked about how important this job is for Chaim Bloom? Probably too. I don't think we've touched on that angle yet, but I'm just thinking about it right now. Like, I really do think that like Chaim already got the chance to run an organization, and I think he did a really good job. But a lot of people on the outside think he did a really bad job in Boston. The most visible move was trading Mookie Betts away. Everyone's upset about it. What people don't see is that his fingerprints were all over these guys that are coming up now: Roman Anthony, Marcelo Meyer, Tristan Casas, yada, yada, yada. But it's not often, like not every time, guys who reportedly fail in their first, and I'm not saying he failed, but it's not every time like guys who don't stick around forever with a first organization get a chance to like really run another one fully. And I wonder if Bloom is also taking this as like, man, this has got to go well for him, like in terms of his career, right? Because if the Cardinals thing is a disaster, like what happens to Chaim Bloom, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's important. It's a great fit, right? The Cardinals need Chaim Bloom to be the guy, and Chaim Bloom needs the Cardinals to be a great fit. And so I think that's something that I hadn't really thought about till right now, but I love having that in the back of my mind where it's like, he's got to be all in. Like, this really does matter.
Yeah. And also too, I was talking to Bernie about it. Like, I like the fact that you're getting a Bloom who's already had a chance at the top seat before. So he's gotten to learn from his mistakes. He's gotten to learn that he's too cautious sometimes. He's gotten to see how important it is for him to have the right guys around him. Facts. He also like now is going to, like most baseball executives, take over after like they get hired and they have in the interview process, and I guess maybe before, they're kind of like from the outside looking in, studying the organization, and then they have to implement all their changes right away, and or at least like wait on some of them and run the baseball team to bounce all these things at once. Bloom got to study for a year. Then he gets to spend a full year revamping the farm system and player development. And then he gets a full year in charge of the Cardinals, or gets to be in charge of the Cardinals full time. I think you're really setting him up for success here, especially with the type of leader he is. And the fact that he wanted that too encourages me, because that's like a sign of humility to be like, hey, I could probably have the top seat right now, but I think it's better for the organization if I revamp this area first. And so it's not fair to say like he was great. I mean, I think we can vary opinions on Boston, but at the very least, he did make mistakes. He wasn't perfect. And I think that's a good thing, because those are areas he can learn from. And he seems like a guy who's going to want to do that, and not like, he doesn't seem like a guy who's super arrogant or anything like that. Again, if he was, I think he'd be Popo right now. I think he would have forced his way into that role, but instead, he seems like a guy who really wants to work collaboratively with his team. And I think he's going to be a great fit for this market.
Yeah. I mean, just from my opinion, like my point of view, right? Like, he's seen a ton of success in Tampa Bay. He was the hot new hire when he went to Boston. And now we've seen a guy who's kind of a seasoned veteran. He's played politics. He's done his time with tough public relation positions, right? Like the owner comes out publicly. The owner comes out publicly and says, "Yeah, we're not signing Mookie Betts long term." But fans don't really see that. All they see is Mookie Betts isn't a Red Sox anymore, so it's all Chaim Bloom's fault. Yeah. You know, he's done that. He's made difficult moves. He's signed extensions. He's developed young guys. Like, this is a guy who's kind of done it all by the time he gets to the Cardinals. This is great. I just can't say how excited I am to see him take the reins. Like, I want it now. And I know we're going to get another year of revamping, and that's great. But I'm ready for it.
I mean, the nice thing is we did see him influence some decisions last offseason, right? Like, I asked him, winter warm-up about this. I was like, hey, we brought in Bloom, and there's all these guys that have connections to him. Like, is that a coincidence? He's like, no, I bounced it off Bloom. I talked to him. So like, Fernandez, O'Brien, Kittredge, Robertson, and I think there's another guy they grabbed that had a Bloom connection. It wasn't necessarily because of Bloom, but like a lot of the guys they brought in were connected to Chaim Bloom in some way. And so if he was doing that as the advisor, new guy, I think as the Pobo in waiting, that will also happen. It's just he doesn't have the responsibility of having to run all that stuff day to day. He can kind of convince the conversations when he feels like it's needed. So, Robert, I think you're forecasting a conversation we're going to have here in the coming episodes about which guys the Cardinals could hold on to and potentially trade later, or just hold on to because they're valuable, and which guys they should try to trade now. So I think that's a conversation for another time. Sandy, Andrew, anything you guys want to address on the back end? Or
the postseason is fun.
My bracket's looking pretty good.
Yeah, I know.
I got them all.
You took all my picks. Like, I think you knew exactly what I was going to do, and I don't really have a chance to win anymore because we all have all the same picks going forward.
Well, you can attest. I debated the Royals Baltimore one.
That's true.
And I went Baltimore with my heart because even though I think it's fun, the Royals, I want the Orioles to be good.
I was going to pick the Mets in the NLCS. But then I switched my pick at the last minute to put the Brewers in the NLCS because, one, I thought the Phillies were going to choke, and two, you guys didn't give the Brewers any respect, and we made that mistake during the regular season, and they won 93 games. So I decided to pick the Mets, or to pick the Brewers over the Mets. I was very sad.
Sad. All right.
Stinks. I got them all wrong.
So bad. Okay. It's okay. Well, we appreciate everyone tuning in today. Again, if it's your first time tuning in or you've been listening for a while, like the video, helps us out a ton. Hit that little thumbs up, super easy. Subscribe, helps the channel a ton. And we going to continue to bring Cardinals content throughout the offseason. We'll have more special guests, especially as we get real information about things. As of right now, we're kind of all in the holding pattern of seeing what will happen. Again, MLB playoffs are really fun right now. I guess I know we've all made our picks kind of to an extent, but like going into the ALCS, NLCS, Sandy, who do you think is going to make the World Series?
Man, in my heart, I want it to be Cleveland Mets, but in my head, it's also Cleveland Mets.
Oh,
let's go. See a little switcheroo there. Come on.
Okay. I'm still going Dodgers, Yankees.
Yeah, I'm going Dodgers.
Probably right. I'd rather be wrong and be rooting for something fun than this.
Is it fun though? It's so much better for baseball if more people are watching it in the World Series.
Yeah.
I thought the World Series last year was pretty fun.
I did not watch.
It was a nightmare scenario for MLB. You know what? The storylines with a Cleveland New York Mets World Series would be really great, though.
Lindor.
Two teams that haven't won a World Series in 60 years.
Yeah.
Going against
the Dodgers haven't won a real World Series in like 40 years. So there you go.
So you have those, or you have the storylines of we get to see Ohtani, Judge, Soto,
Sandy, I think you're scared
Yamamoto,
for Ohtani
Freeman.
to wipe the floor with Aaron Judge in the World Series.
Okay. First off, that's one series, so it won't affect anything. And second, no. I want to see the Cleveland Guardians. I want to see, Naylor. I want to see Brian Rocchio, Tanner Beattie.
Imagine Tommy Edman hits a righty on righty walk-off home run. Actually, what's going to happen is Game 7. It's going to be super under the radar. No one's going to really realize it happens. Tyler Glasnow with his arm in a sling is going to come out there and throw gas and close out Game 7.
What's going to happen is there's going to be a really sketchy fake rain delay called to rob Cleveland of another World Series.
That'd be tough. tough.
Yep.
That is tough. People forget they were 3-1.
I was kind of hoping the Padres would tie it in the 9th inning, and then Chris Taylor would hit a walk-off home run.
That would have been awful.
To send Mike Schilt out of LA again.
But, awful.
Tough.
But no, I really do think Cleveland Mets would be really fun. Like Cleveland hasn't won a World Series in 70 years, and the Mets haven't won since the late 60s. So that's a really long time. Two clubs that low-key are cursed. Although Cleveland is more cursed. It's been brutal to be a Cleveland.
What if we root for the team with a lower payroll in each case? So the Dodgers and then the Cleveland.
No.
On that note, thanks for watching today's episode. Like and subscribe. Helps the channel a ton. We'll be back on Wednesday. We'll see you guys next time.